Hey everyone, so hopefully the chart that we're looking at right now will look vaguely familiar to all of you. This is obviously the line chart that we did right before spring break, where I sort of wanted to demonstrate to you guys how quickly and easily we can adapt our code to doing different types of visualizations through the Google Visualization Library, and also look at how we can use different data sources. So if you recall, when we did this chart, we actually, and we'll take a quick look at the source here, we actually created this Fred data file from a CSV file, a common separated value file that we downloaded from the St. Louis Federal Reserve. It's CPI, or the Consumer Price Index data, and we used Mr. Data Converter actually to change that into a JSON array here. So this week what we're going to do is essentially rebuild this, or build an alternate version of this, but we're going to use a dynamic data source. And of course the question is, why would we want to use a dynamic data source? Or maybe that isn't really a question after all. As we said, even though we may, sort of understand the structure at this point, it's not an interface that is familiar to all that many people. As we know, it's very, very easy to break code just by accidentally deleting a comma or the like. And it's not really a very friendly format for data that we need to update on a regular basis. So what we're going to look at this week is how we can use a combination of sort of free online technologies to basically create something approximating a spreadsheet interface that we can share with other people, be they reporters, editors, whomever, who might be doing things like data updating for us, right? So again, also we're creating things that are scalable in the sense that we don't always have to be, that the developer, you, and designer doesn't always have to be the person who's updating the data. So the first thing that we're going to do is the same thing we did last time, which is we're going to create a new web project, and I'm just going to duplicate my files from the line chart, and I'm going to call this dynamic data chart. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to copy out, for now I'm going to copy all three of my files and just go ahead and paste them in here. So you can see I just highlighted them. I could have right-clicked, copied and pasted. And I'm going to go ahead and open up, I'm just going to go ahead and open up these files. In many cases we're going to rename these, but it's obviously not strictly necessary, right? Because if I put them in a different folder on my server, then I'll be looking at a different project anyway. But so let's just, once again, we're going to look at this data set and sort of get a sense for how it's structured, right? So we see that this is a JSON object in the sense that it begins with a curly brace, right? And we have the name of the parameter, which is CPI data. And then what we have is an array of arrays is our data set. And, right now our JavaScript, passes the name of this file to the GET request. The GET request returns the data to the function build chart, and build chart logs it out and does some work with it. So the first step that we're going to do is we are going to go to Google Fusion Tables. So Google Fusion Tables is a product of Google, not surprisingly. It is available in Drive. And so if you go to your Drive tab on your Google account, this is my sort of demo Google account, so there's not a lot here. And you choose Create, you'll see that there is a number of things. Oh, so this is interesting. So it actually doesn't even show tables there. So we're going to choose Connect More Apps. You may already have Fusion Tables, but possibly not. So we're going to say Fusion Tables. Okay. Choose Connect and say OK. Right, so now I can say, okay, connect a Fusion table. Now, a Fusion table is essentially a spreadsheet, right? It's a little bit different, and not this week, but the next week, we're going to look at some of the other really cool stuff it can do, namely generating interactive maps, which is great. But we can think of it basically as a spreadsheet, as an online spreadsheet. And so what does that mean? Well, of course, we know that a spreadsheet almost any spreadsheet program can parse, of course, our CSV files. So as an example, let's say I have my line chart, right, that we're looking at here, although it still says it's a bar chart. I have my line chart and I say, look, I did my initial download of data. I got all of my historical data, going back to 2000, but I want to update this every month. I don't want to re-download the data every single month, right? I don't want to have to go through that process, even though it's not difficult. It does take 10 minutes, let's say. It would be much easier if when that number comes out, a reporter, for example, could just, whoever the reporter is that covers that material could just go into a spreadsheet, add the new number, and then this chart updated dynamically, right? That's really what we're looking for, is something that stays updated and is sort of evergreen in that sense. So the first step that I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by uploading my existing data set. So I'm going to go to Browse, and I think, oops, CPI, maybe. I think I'm going to look in my folder here, my target folder. Maybe here. Nope, let's try this. Somewhere I have my CPI data. And let's just try searching for .csv. See what I get. I think it was, there we are. Okay, sorry, that was a little fraught. Hopefully you have yours in a more obvious location. But so I'm going to take this file and upload it. I'm going to say, yep, that's the file I want. Click Next, and you'll notice that we go through a pretty similar set of steps that we saw, for example, in Google Refine. We see it in Excel, where it says, oh, is this, here's a preview of your data, for example, which is what it's giving us here, right? Remember, we had date and value. So now this is a really nice feature of Google Fusion Tables, and one of the reasons why I'm very fond of it, which is that it's giving me dynamic CPI, or let's maybe say CPI since 2000. Okay, that's going to be my table name. I'm choosing Allow Export. Okay, this means that anybody who looks at this table can actually download the data. There are some reasons why I might not want to do that at various points depending on the data I'm looking at. Right now it's giving me a chance to capture a lot of the metadata around this file, right? Which again, really, really useful. It's the reason why we asked you to do the documentation when you're doing data analysis, because of course, where did I get this data from? Can I verify it? What if I want to find it again? So the first thing is the attribution, which is important, and I believe that it came from the St. Louis Fed. So yes, it did. So I'm going to call it, I'll just say it's from the St. Louis Fed, right? So St. Louis Fed. Okay, there's my attribution page link. This is saying, and maybe I'll say data downloaded 3/14/2013. This is the monthly CPI rating for the US, right? Obviously, we could have more robust material in here, but you get the idea. So I now say finish, and takes a moment. Okay, and what we see is, again, something that looks basically like a spreadsheet. Now, you'll notice that there are some features of this that are very similar to Google Refine, right? We do have a scrolling opportunity, but it's showing me 1 through 100 of 150. If I want to see the next page of results, then I need to click that arrow, similarly the way I would need to do in Google Refine. There are a bunch of different sort of analysis capabilities in here, but the main thing that I want to point out is that it's basically a spreadsheet, right? I mean, it's not actually, we don't have to do a lot of work to explain to people what this is or how they might interact with it. Slightly different than Excel because we need to use some different approaches to adding data, but there it is. So the first thing that I want to, now that I have this activated and uploaded, what I want to do is connect this to my existing chart. And so to do that, I need to do a couple of steps first. And one is that I need to generate a so-called API key, because what we're going to do is we're going to set up a call that looks, oops, where did I put it? That looks something like this, okay? So this is really just a URL, a special URL that when I pass it the ID, I need to pass it the ID of this table, which is a long gobbledygooking looking string, and I need to pass it my API key, which is another long gobbledygooking string, and a SQL statement, a SQL select statement, which we'll go over. It's like this. And what it will do is it will return as a JSON object all of the data that is stored in this spreadsheet, in this table. So what that means is that if I update this table, then the data in my visualization will update. So the first step I need to do here is I need to generate my API key. So to acquire, it says, you know, I'll give you guys a link to this, but basically I have to go to something called the APIs console. When I click this, it takes me there directly. And I can say, so I'm going to go create project. And all I need to do here is scroll down. These are all of the APIs that Google has available, and you'll see right here I've got the Fusion Tables API. I can say click. I am going to agree to their terms. I accept them, and I also agree to these terms, right? Which is basically saying I'm not going to do nefarious or damaging things. Although I do encourage all of you to read that more closely for yourselves. I've obviously accepted these in other places. So now I click on the Fusion Tables API button. Sorry, actually what I want to do is API access, I believe. Okay, and so this is what I'm worried about is something called simple API access. This is what's going to let me place a GET request, just place a URL request through the browser. So here I have my API key. So what I'm going to do is copy this, and I'm going to create a new, I'm just going to, paste this into a text file for the time being to hang on to it, right? So I'm going to say API key, right, is there. And then I'm going to look at, I won't worry about saving that right now. And then the other thing that I need in order to get data from this is I need the unique ID of this table. I think this is it up here, but just to be safe, I'm going to go to File, About This Table. And one of the things it's going to give me is encrypted ID, which yes, in fact, is that same thing that's in the URL bar. So now I've done that, I'm also going to put that into my handy dandy, whoops, little text file there. So table ID, okay. And now to get a handle on what information, what kind of JSON this call would return that when I want to pull this out, I'm just going to use this example from the documentation. So you can see here, and how do I try this out? I'm actually going, as they suggest, to put this in the URL bar of my browser. Now, obviously key is not your API key here, it's going to be the actual API key, which is this. Okay, so I'm going to paste that in there. And then this is from their example. So what we're looking at here is a URL with so-called query strings, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in class. Basically, query strings are separated from each other by ampersands, with the first one distinguished by a question mark, hence query. And now the second thing I need is my table ID. Okay, take that. And you notice that until I hit return, right, it doesn't actually do anything. So I can kind of construct this whole thing. And if luck would have it, okay, so this is actually a really good point. It says global message login required. So there's one really important thing about this that I haven't done yet, and that is that I have to make this, this table visible. So right now the default, as you can see, is private. I'm going to change that to anyone with the link. What that means is that no one has to sign in order to see this. If they get the URL, they'll be able to retrieve the data. However, it's not going to be indexed by Google. Now, if you want to make your data indexable by Google, that's up to you, and there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but it's not a requirement. So now you can see this is actually pretty great, because when I do this, I'm actually getting back what? I'm getting back, it has the title rows, but see how this is really similar to what we have in our Fred data JSON, right? It's not formatted exactly the same way, but it is just as our other version is. It is an array of arrays with comma-separated values in between them. So we're going to break here for now. We're going to hook this up to our existing line chart, and then in the next video, and then show how we can use this to have dynamically updated visualizations. See you in a moment.